I'd like to start by welcoming you all to Science Through Video, How to Tell a Compelling Story. This is part of a series of workshops and panels sponsored by the BU Research Office in collaboration with the BU Marketing and Communications Department, designed to help faculty effectively communicate their research to the public. In this, the fourth installment of the series, we're going to talk about video as a tool for science and research communication. So, this is what's going to happen. First, we're going to tell you a little bit about how video is used to communicate research stories, your stories, for the most part, which are some of our favorite stories to tell here at BU. We'll talk about how institutions like BU and MIT, my colleague to the left, use video to tell the stories of their faculty, how video also helps those stories get the attention of major news outlets, like the New York Times, and how video is being used in conjunction with grant applications and scientific journal submissions. We will also give some examples of how individual researchers, like my colleagues at the end, and labs use video to promote their own work. After we get through that, that's part one, we're going to try in part two to provide you with some practical tips, tools, and certainly some advice for how you can all better use video to get your stories out into the world. So first, let me introduce the panelists, starting with me. My name is Devin Hahn. I'm the senior video producer at BU Productions, where we produce content for the daily news website here, BU Today, the alumni magazine, Bostonia Online, the BU Research website, and BU's social media channels. I have 10 years experience producing videos here at BU. I also teach science video production to graduate students in the College of Communications Science Journalism Master's Program. Next to me is Christine Daniloff. Chris comes to us from MIT, where she's the creative director of the MIT News Office. Chris has been at MIT for 8 years, and she has a lot of experience working with researchers to help them promote their work. She can attest to the value of video to MIT's very successful communication strategies. Thank you for being here. Next, we have Hilary Katulak. Hilary is here from BU's Public Relations Office, where she works with faculty to help them get their stories out to the mainstream media. She's going to help demystify that process for us a little bit. And then at the end of the table, we have two BU faculty members. Karen Warkentin is professor of biology. She routinely uses video in her lab, and Karen has been very successful in using her own videos to pitch the story of her research out to major news outlets. On the end, we have James Bird, assistant professor of mechanical engineering. Like Karen, JC routinely uses video in his work. JC's been very successful at leveraging video content for use in his communication with academic journals as well as news outlets. So let's thank everyone for being here today. Okay, so video, video, video. Why are we so set on convincing you that video is a super effective communication tool? Obviously, the technology of video is nothing new, but it is increasingly becoming the preferred medium for delivering narrative content to broad audiences, particularly in this era of digital first, particularly online, and particularly on social media. Video routinely outperforms other storytelling mediums. Here are some figures compiled by Marcom's social media team, care of WordStream and BuzzSumo, about the reach and impact of video versus text and photo. I'm not going to read these to you, but feel free to read them. I was told that I'd be speaking to a bunch of scientists and no one would believe me unless I included statistics. These are not made up, even the 1200 one. Hopefully, this helps reinforce the message that video is a valuable tool. But of more interest to you all, I assume, is the fact that video is one of the most popular subjects, that one of the most popular subjects for online video is science and research. This is a list of science-oriented YouTube channels and their subscriber numbers. The M stands for millions. I've hidden John Oliver in there just to give some context, right? Science video is very popular. As popular or more than John Oliver. Sorry, John. Okay, let's turn to MIT. In terms of academic institutions, MIT has an enviable web presence. Their YouTube page, with over 300,000 subscribers on their YouTube channel and an actively engaged viewing community. MIT pushes out a lot of video content, a lot of excellent video content, And not all of it is science related, though you might think it would be. They make beautiful student profile videos, campus culture videos. They have famous speakers come to campus, so celebrities. But routinely, the video content that gets the most traction is, of course, science and research. And I have here MIT's top 5 best performing videos on YouTube. As you can see, they're all science.
And that was for the previous year, right?
That was last year?
Yeah,
Okay.
last year.
You guys probably saw the cheetah, right? I mean, like, we've seen these videos. So I'm just pointing this out to reinforce the fact that you all here in this room, at least the researchers of you, have access to a highly prized commodity, which is the environment where science happens. But Chris, would you like to talk a little bit more about how MIT works with video, particularly in your work? Yeah.
Also, just to sort of put another exclamation point about research video, is on our YouTube channel specifically, we pay attention to our analytics and our audience interaction all the time. When we put videos up on our YouTube channel and kind of blast those out to our, I think what's fast approaching, it's like 380,000, it's almost 400,000 now. People routinely get back and say, I don't, like if it's a slice of life or something featurey or lifestyle, that this is not why I subscribe to your channel. It's the research. So the way that we use video is the news office, the social media arm, and the media relations arm, we all work together to sort of get the news of MIT out. And one of the most powerful tools that we have is video, to show things about that research that are difficult to get across in text, but also because video gets far more traction than our written pieces. And that's true not only on the website, but it's true when media outlets reach out to us and they ask for materials about our stories. They're always asking for video if we have it. So we regularly make videos when story pitches are coming in from our writers about someone's got a paper coming out in a journal, or somebody's working on something in the lab or a department lab or center. One of the first things we ask ourselves is it visual, meaning, not only photography, but specifically video? Is this something that is going to be good for video? The researchers, I would say they have learned, and the numbers are continuing to rise as researchers that get, even if they aren't professional videographers themselves, if they have students in their lab, which just about all of them do, oftentimes that student will get some video of the setup in the lab, something about the research environment during their research, and they send that along to us with the paper, or the fact that the story's been the paper's been accepted, and the video oftentimes will use some of their footage, and maybe equally or more will use that footage, and we'll go in and we'll shoot more video in the lab.
And we'll have some examples of that kind of thing to show you guys.
Right, and so
from my work too.
Yeah, great, but that really, every month we kind of compile our analytics, and the video, does staggeringly well. People want to see research video. It's just what, and we realize that's our bread and butter. Even though it's important to us to get the life out, research is our bread and butter. So we use it on its own. We use it as part of the outreach package of the text story, the imagery, links, various links that go to the departments, labs, and centers that have to do with research. The video is an important part of that. That video, it has a longer shelf life for us than text pieces, which oftentimes we have sort of found, like after a story breaks, the text piece doesn't get a lot of, it kind of dies down. Not a lot of people are going to that story any longer. But as with mathematics at MIT, this was a video profiling a department after a mathematics award was won. Suddenly it went up on Reddit, and it was the 5th most viewed video last year. It has a longer shelf life, video does for us. So we realize that, it's sort of not, you one and done. You can repurpose that. We link to things in the past from previous research, relating to current research being done. but it's really probably the most valuable visual tool that we have. And again, the numbers, number of people watching the videos about a particular subject are much higher than the number of people reading the stories. That's, I think, 100% of the time.
So sorry for the journalists.
I know. It's like you say, it's sort of the way people consume content
Right.
these days. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. Of course, you guys might be thinking, well, of course MIT has cool science videos. It's MIT. They have cool science. That's all they do. But we have cool science here, too, at BU. And in fact, especially since the launch of the BU Research website in 2014, my group has had a major focus on producing videos about BU science and research. Because, as I mentioned before, we know they're popular and they're stories that we like to tell. So let me give you a couple of examples of videos that we produced in my group at Marcom about BU faculty and some of the positive impacts they had. This is a video that we did in 2015. It was a feature called Lessons from Teotihuacan about the work of BU archaeology professor David Carballo. We went to Mexico with David and produced a series of 4 videos, each focusing on a different aspect of his work. All 4 videos were picked up by Science 360, which is the NSF's science video channel, which means that David's research spent a full week on their front page, which is awesome. And I'm sure you guys know this, but funding agencies like the NSF love to see this kind of stuff. So this is something we produced on him. The video and story were also picked up by Futurity, a website run by the AAU. And this is probably just a coincidence, but I do think David got tenure shortly after. This one is called 7,000 Flavors of Addiction, and this actually launched the research website. Am I making that sound? No. This is about e-cigarette use among students. It was kind of a long video, 8 minutes, which some people will tell you not to do, but we did it anyway. The video features voices of multiple BU faculty members, each discussing the topic of e-cigarettes from the perspective of their own research. This video and its accompanying article, as I said, launched the BU Research website. The video on Facebook, or the video on YouTube, got 15,000 views, which is pretty good for us, actually. And this is one of those ones that even though the story launched, I think, in 2014, the numbers, because of the continued interest in this subject, the numbers for video views have kind of like maintained. We keep getting them. I'm not sure if that's true also for the article. But this was great for us. And perhaps most relevant to you guys, this video helped raise the public profiles of the faculty members who appeared in it. This is Mike Siegel, who already had a kind of high public profile. But Avi Spira, who we interviewed for this video, pulmonologist from the medical campus, told us that he'd rarely been contacted by media prior to participating in this project for anything. And since we did this, he has appeared as a quoted expert in the New York Times, Time Magazine, and all of those publications there. So that's great for him and very cool. There he is. So how does this happen? How does video content help get the attention of the NSF or the New York Times? Sometimes it involves intrepid faculty, like the folks on our panel down at the end, pitching themselves directly to news outlets, which I'm sure they'll talk about in a minute. But I think it's important for you guys to understand the role that BU's PR office plays in this process. So I wonder if Hilary can talk a little bit about how she uses video to get stories of BU researchers out there into the world.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So a big part of my job is taking interesting faculty and the work coming from BU and really bringing those stories to light. And whether that's through working in collaboration with BU's editorial team to share them on our own channels, and also external media like Devin mentioned, so the New York Times or Wired. So a big part of my thought process, in going into how I can achieve that goal, is how can I take this kind of raw material and make it palatable and easy to digest and relevant for media and the audiences that will be consuming that content. And video has been a huge tool that I think has allowed me to be successful and really get some of these science stories out to audiences that otherwise wouldn't have had the exposure. When you think of research, right, usually it takes months or many, many years to really come to fruition. It's complex, it's multifaceted, and while your peers might be able to easily digest the information, reporters and their audiences might need a little bit of help, right? So when I'm working with reporters, they might not get some of the nuances. They might not get, like, you know, they might see it as interesting, but not how they can really make it a true story and digestible for their readers. And I think that's where video really comes into play and why it's so powerful. And then you couple that with reporters are on a very tight deadline. It's a 24-hour news cycle. They don't really have, you know, 6 months to get a story right. They have 3 days to read, you know, maybe a 19-page report and to kind of make it into something. And so given those kind of two factors, I found that video has been very effective because, one, you're taking something that's complex and you're distilling it down and making it accessible for new audiences, right? You're also in charge of the narrative of the video. So another thing that I think that's helpful and something I always work to combat is you hate when there's kind of misrepresentation of your work in the media. And so with video, you're getting to tell the narrative you want them to, right? In a way that their readers want to consume it and digest the information, and in a way that allows reporters to be really flexible, right? So it's being conscious of their time because they don't have a lot of time to really you know, synthesize the information, and also, you know, allows them to be flexible in the way that they promote it themselves via their social channels and their, you know, on their website and whatnot. So I think it's been just a very good tool to get science kind of out there in new ways. And I can end with kind of an example to put it all into context. So before my time at BU, I worked with a company that made nanoscopes. So if you think of like a microscope magnifying something, a nanoscope could do it even more. And the coolness factor about them is they could do it at human scale, and they had integrations with virtual reality, and this was back in 2015, so VR wasn't as mainstream maybe as it is now, or integrated. And so, you know, while I thought it was really interesting, I was also really close to it. And so they were having this kind of big launch come out, and we were working with Wired and with Mashable and a few others. But specifically, the reporters from Wired and Mashable thought, you know, hey, this is interesting, but they were struggling to really make it into a story because, you know, some of their readers have never stepped foot in a lab, or maybe they, you know, knew what kind of goes on, but they wouldn't know, like, why this nanoscope would really be relevant to the day-to-day life of someone working with it. And so, you know, I said, we have this kind of package which included a video, which showed like the whole experience as if you were a scientist using this tool. And it really was like the light bulb moment for these journalists because they all of a sudden could see it, right, in a condensed way, but really be immersed in this experience. And it also allowed them to bring this visual element to the story. And they both ended up writing the story, which was really great. And at the end of the day, this was a piece of, like, you know, hardware that the story and the narrative got transformed into something bigger. So I'll just kind of leave with that, yeah.
Video is cool. And I'll also bounce off of what Hilary said about this idea of not wanting reporters to misrepresent your work. One nice thing about working with your home institution's communications department is that we will never do that. But let's talk to some of our faculty. I've made them sit there quietly for long enough. Karen, as I mentioned before, is a professor of biology, and her research features the very photogenic red-eyed tree frog, which you can see here. Karen, do you want to give us a few examples of how you've leveraged the video content coming out of your office
Sure.
to get your story out there?
So the video that's running over there is actually a video that I worked with Devin to produce, and the short version of what I do is that I study the embryo self-defense, escape hatching behavior of frogs. And we've been using images and video for a long time with this because at first to like get the data and then to convince people that this was really a thing, that a frog could hatch fast enough to escape from a snake, that was hard to believe. But when you see it on the video, it is instantly convincing. And then, even when I was a graduate student and discovered this, TV stations were interested. Imaging has just gotten easier and better and more accessible over the years that we've been doing this. So in this video, there are clips that are quite old from my lab, and there are things that are recorded quite recently, and so including things that we collected for the purposes of getting data, but some of them look really good. And so I usually make a note in my Excel spreadsheet, oh yeah, this is good for outreach video. This is good, like that little snake there, for instance. And I just keep track of those. And then when we have a paper that's gonna come out, so some journals, Journal of Experimental Biology, for instance, is really good with getting the word out, and they make video abstracts, or you can make video abstracts, and they'll post them to their YouTube channel. Do you have that on there?
Yeah, I can bounce over that.
Can you bounce to the? So where possible, we'll work with journal publicity offices. We'll make videos that can be posted through the journal websites, and
You want to play with
yeah,
sound?
that one, sure. So that particular.
Escape from danger. We studied
You can
this
just
with red-eyed tree
silence it.
frog.
So that is me and one of my graduate students telling the story of a discovery that was in her paper. And so we have these old video clips. We have some newer clips, which were high-speed video. That's that. And it allowed us to tell the story in our own words. Now that video abstract got more than 5,000 views, which is, I'm sure, more people than ever will look at the paper or read the whole thing, right? But it's us telling our story. Then we could use that to send to journalists, and the JEB people made that accessible to journalists, and we made the clips that we had used in that also available to the journalists, so they could build different stories, some drawing directly from this, or taking their own angles. And if you go to scroll down from there, there's some, that's on the video page. If you go to the publicity page, scroll down a bit, there's a bunch of links there of different coverage. So Science Take was on the NSF channel as well, I think. There's a bunch. So that was really very appealing, and it was nice for us to be able to control the story because we told it first with video, and I think it helped the reporters, as you were saying, to really get it and to be able to convey it in an accurate way.
I'd also like to point out that this video that was scrolling by for a minute when you first started talking, so except for these shots of Karen in her office, all of the footage in this is stuff that Karen took herself.
Yeah, so most of it is stuff that I took myself. Some of it is, say, the ones that I'm in Panama. Some of that is stuff that I set up myself and just like put a camera on a tripod and walked around and did things in front of it, which is kind of weird, right? And so like mostly what you'll see is that Devin used ones that I'm not actually looking at the camera because I had weird expressions on my face.
But what about this stuff?
But some of them are ones that, there might be some clips in there that some of my students took.
Right.
And also there was a videographer at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute where we work, and I had him just come out for one day and follow us around. So we started by taking videos of like, I need to see this and I need to quantify it from the video. And then we started using it to tell stories. And now we also try to take videos of like what the work looks like. And some things, I actually think that, some things that we just do routinely on a day-to-day basis, and they're like really normal and kind of boring for us, when you put it in a video and maybe you edit it or you speed it up, you take out the boring bits, and so you just have something happening more quickly, actually it looks pretty cool, and it makes it real for people. So that video got a lot of views, and that tells kind of an integrative story about some of our work. And Devin actually came and talked to me in my office for like a really long time, right? It was
yeah.
like a long interview,
Yes.
and edited it together very beautifully to tell this story with our footage. And then beside that, that little Facebook video, which has now had like 2.8 million views or something. And that's kind of like the Reader's Digest condensed version of the same story.
We'll talk more about this format in a little bit. We're not promising 2.8 million views, but it does happen sometimes.
But it can happen, right? I wasn't expecting that either, right?
That's sort of the fun kind of aspect of working in the social media space, is that you just never know what's going to get traction, and sometimes something really exciting like that happens. Cool, thank you. So back to this. JC has no charismatic microfauna to point his camera at. JC researches something that on the surface doesn't sound like the sexiest of topics, which is tiny bubbles like the ones that pop in your club soda. But JC's managed to repurpose visual materials produced in his lab to increase the visibility of his research through video. And JC, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you guys think about that stuff.
Sure. I think there's a few different aspects. So I study fluid dynamics, and by being dynamic, it's saying there's a time element to it. So video works really well if you want to look at things changing with time. It also works well for kind of parts that are hard to get across in a paper, which is kind of the emotional side of science. And when I say that, I think of when I write papers, I try to keep them pretty much devoid of emotion. But the two emotions that I try to kind of solicit in my lab are curiosity and excitement. And in those ways, I think those are ones that, I think as scientists, hopefully we all have felt at some point, and hopefully continue to feel. And it's something that I think works really well visually and can work really well in video. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to say something, for curiosity, if you want to show someone something and sort of get their curiosity to be elicited, having them see an effect that's perhaps counterintuitive, or in some ways just is visually different maybe than they might expect or haven't seen in that way, even if it's sort of commonplace, like a bubble popping. If this happens so fast, you don't often see the different aspects of it. By seeing it in slow motion, maybe that will come across in some way where you can say, oh, okay, this is kind of cool, or I'm curious, why does it behave this way? And then the excitement comes across when you either have the researchers who are excited because they also don't know and they're curious, and it's a sense of figuring out why. And that process of sort of what you're ultimately perhaps doing science about is this revealing this underlying physics of the world, or something about this, that's excitement. And it's excitement because it's kind of addressing what you're curious about, or at least the person who's researching it was curious about. So that's part of the reason why I think we try to have video, and video works well with the work that we're doing, but I think that transcends beyond just drops and bubbles. I think the other part that I can speak of is, because we're looking at drops and bubbles, this is something where the application isn't immediately obvious. And so unlike if we were trying to cure cancer, where you don't really need to explain to people why it's worth taking federal funds and doing that. And because we take federal funds and we do our research, I feel some sort of ownership to make sure that we can describe why we didn't waste taxpayers' dollars in the research we did. And so in that sense, trying to distill what we're doing in a way that's going to be digestible by those that are paying for our research but aren't necessarily reading the journal articles that are coming from it, I think that can be really helpful, and video is a good way of doing that. And the last point I want to kind of make with that is something I've kind of become to recognize, is that, especially when making videos and thinking about telling our story to a broader audience, is that a lot of times precision and clarity aren't usually on the same direction. Usually they're orthogonal or even opposite. And in this way, video forces me to think, when I'm taking a video, of what is it that's really the bigger point? What is the aspects that are to make this as clear as possible. How do we set up the lighting to identify, where we want shadows and where we don't? How do we make this so that people feel like a sense of scale? Do you put in something in the background, someone's hand, where you can get a sense of, okay, it must be roughly this size, or a coin or something where you can get some sense of scale and time scale as well. So in these ways, if you try to emphasize that clarity part, even if you're, this is maybe a representative video, it may not be, there's maybe some subtleties with this or anything like that, it's a way that helps, me as a scientist see the bigger picture and kind of focus on the bigger picture so that we can kind of use that to guide, okay, what is this all about? Why do we care? Why should other people care about this work? So.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, so hopefully at this point you guys are asking yourselves, how can I get in on this, right? How can I start using video in my day-to-day work, either to promote my own research, to get myself out there as an expert source, or to just generally be cool and with it in this digital-first world? Good question. There are a couple of ways, and they're directly related to a lot of the stuff that our panelists have been talking about. But first I want to say that we're kind of talking about video in two different ways here. I've been talking about professionally produced videos that people like myself and Chris's team make about people like you guys. Videos with interviews, scenes, B-roll, music, editing, all that stuff. A made video. But we're also talking about sort of raw video content, right? Video shot by people like you in your lab, which, as you've already heard from these guys at the end, can easily be repurposed for a host of different reasons, or host of different purposes. So we're going to talk about both of those things. Yes, so a great way to go about getting professional video content produced about your work by people like me, or if you're at MIT, by people like Chris's team, is to pitch yourself to us. You can also pitch yourself directly to mainstream news media outlets, but I would encourage you to take the first step down that path and talk to the folks at your home institution's communications office. We might want to do some coverage on you, like the videos that I produced with Karen, which then might make for a sort of a nicer package to get to the next step, the sort of higher level, the New York Times, that kind of thing. But even for that, one of the most common questions that I get as a video producer is someone will see my work, especially a researcher, and they'll basically be like, how can I get one of those, right? What do I have to do to get covered even by BU Today or the BU Research website? Well, you have to pitch your story to us. You have to get in touch with us. Contact the folks at the BU Research website, contact the folks at BU Today, and tell us your story. And if you think there could be a video angle to your story, definitely emphasize that. And even better, if you can show us some kind of video clips, raw footage like we've been talking about, that come out of your lab just to drive the point home. These are a bunch of research videos that we did over the past few years. Each one of these videos represents the kind of impact that I was talking about with Teotihuacan and e-cigarettes. Each video represents professors that were able to kind of raise the level of their visibility. Many of these stories were subsequently picked up by mainstream media outlets as well. Yes, so we keep saying that mainstream media outlets, major media outlets, and in fact your home institution's communication channels will be more inclined to cover your work if you include video clips as part of the pitch, right? It sounds like a chicken and egg thing, like you need to give us video for us to make video about you. And it's true that people like me and Chris and even the New York Times may be more inclined to cover your work, write about it, or make a video if we see some kind of video, something from you in your lab. But the bar for this kind of video is like fairly low. You don't need to have, exquisite drone footage flying over the pyramids in Mexico to get the attention of us or to get the attention of the New York Times. We've shown that both Karen and JC, with essentially raw footage from their labs, that they capture doing routine research have been able to leverage that to get into the New York Times and certainly to get our attention. So it doesn't mean you have to be a professional yourself, but it does mean you have to do something yourself, which you may not want to do, but we'll talk about that. Because one concern that I often hear from folks when we ask them, to shoot video in their labs is that their research doesn't look like anything. Well, it probably does, and Karen put really well, like the context in which research happens, it is interesting. I mean, you look at it every day, so it stops looking interesting, but labs are interesting places. Certainly to the general public. They're the spaces where science happens. And you have unmediated access to those spaces, and you can invite the rest of us in using video. This is a Vice Media series from their sub-brand Motherboard. They have a whole video series just devoted to visiting random labs around the world. And they're cool videos. Also, I bet you have students in your lab. And young, engaged, enthusiastic people doing science will always be something the rest of us want to see. So point the camera at your students from time to time. That's a joke there. I should also add that so maybe your research isn't visual in that you don't feel like there's anything you can really point a camera at, but it might be able to be visualized. And this is sort of a sidebar, but we do love making graphics and animations of scientific processes that can't be seen by the human eye. These are a couple of examples of videos that we did. The top one is a video about a guy looking for dark matter, which obviously you can't point a camera at. And the bottom one is subatomic particles colliding at CERN. So we made videos about both of these things, nice, short, very effective little videos that the researchers could then use to get their story out there. And we did this because the research sounded cool. Another complaint, I don't have the equipment. Right, you probably don't. But you probably have somewhere to start, and probably it's right in your pocket. Maybe some of you are holding it right now in your hands, checking Twitter and not paying attention. I have to say, as a professional video producer, I am kind of loath to say you can just use your phone to do this stuff, because obviously if we come with all of our professional equipment, it will look better. But this is a good place to start. I mean, you do have somewhere to start. A phone clip can go part of the distance in giving us a sense of what the visual elements of your lab are. They certainly can be part of a pitch, especially a pitch to people at your home institution's communication channels. Phone. Oh, and as I said, the bar for footage for these kind of videos can be pretty low. This is the New York Times Science Take. This is a whole video series devoted, just sort of based on raw scientific footage coming out of labs. You will see JC's bubbles and Karen's embryos there, actually, on the left. I should have maybe picked different ones. So this whole video series is just James Gorman standing in front of a gray sheet and showing all of the New York Times viewership cool lab footage. And a lot of this was just taken in the course of doing research. That one in the bottom middle, I mean, a lot of them, they don't look like much, but when put in context by James there in front of his gray sheet, it makes for a really compelling, interesting little story. Oh, did you want to talk about the sneeze?
Sure. Which is an example of pretty low, but it's not,
Right?
That thing went crazy.
Right.
But again, sort of fluid dynamics, and this was something that was taken in the lab, and it was very low resolution. It was a high-speed camera, and showing sort of the trajectory when you sneeze, really just how that travels, and but it was one of those things. It wasn't high-quality footage, but it went kind of crazy, and it got the point across in a way that no amount of writing will ever show that in that way. So, and that was something that the researcher shot. That was something that was sent to us along with the paper, and and we ran with it.
Obviously, this wasn't shot on an iPhone. This is using specialized equipment, but you can start with your phone. You can also beef up your phone a little bit. Like if you want to kind of, I would, if you're gonna use your phone to film stuff happening in your lab, do get a little tripod for it. These things are super cheap. If you really want to be kind to us, get a little external microphone so that the sound is a little bit nicer. But I'll talk about why things like a stable shot and good sound are important a little bit later. Okay, so my research isn't visual. I don't have the equipment. I don't want to. Maybe you don't have to. And I'm sure that our panelists can attest to that. But the bottom line here is that you may have to get creative and you may have to do some stuff. So I wonder maybe if we can go down the line and kind of talk about ways that we might encourage these guys to be creative and think about shooting stuff more in their lab. I have MIT, or resources that we might point them toward, different ways of thinking we might point them toward.
I know one of the things we did, and it was more attended, I'd say, by communicators in the different departments, labs, and centers at MIT, was we ran a week-long workshop about shooting on an iPhone, simple editing, things like that, just sort of getting more comfortable with using your smartphone as a video camera. The other thing that we really, as you say, to pitch your communications office, that, whether it's like some bad footage, and we do get sort of crummy footage all the time, but it's enough to show us like, wow, this is kind of cool. Sometimes it's like one of the videos one of our most viewed videos was about the strongest lightweight material known, and it's about this graphene structure, and it's gotten, I think, it's up over 1 million, but it wasn't really, when you hear about it, like, okay, so, some structure, and it's very lightweight, super strong, but sort of going down and seeing, they said it's kind of cool, and they do this pressure thing on a, sort of like seeing how much pressure this material can withstand. We thought, well, that could be sort of cool and sort of a slow-mo video. And, what Devin said about pitching, for us, that is probably the #1 way that we do go down and make video. And even if there's like some bad, like, what you would consider like, well, this footage is kind of crummy, it gives us an idea like, yeah, this is definitely kind of cool. There are other, tools out there, for shooting, as Devin said, beefing up your iPhone. Spark, if you have to put a video, Adobe Spark is a program that you can very easily make a video post or make a video and then have a ready-made link if you're sending it to a journal or you're sending it to the communications office. And very simply in that, in that cloud app, you can use sound and text, and there are transitions and very simple edits, but you can do some nice work with that.
So did you guys make this video?
This video,
This is the strong material.
we did, but we also used, I believe that some of this footage, though, yes, like some of this came from the researchers, but we did make this video simply because they talked about this and how cool it was, and so we went down and shot our own video.
Awesome.
But really because they pitched it.
It's so strong he can't crush it with his bare
With his
hands.
hands.
That's the world's strongest man. That's what it doesn't say in the captions of that video. So did you guys write down Adobe Spark? Cool. What about the folks in the labs? Thoughts on this for these guys?
Well, so I will say, and I think you have the under a flashlight thing there. So in recent years, when we're trying to get publicity for stories, we've started putting together little online folders with images, with video clips and stuff that the BU news people can use, and that we can just, when we're sending a press release, just include that link and say, like, here are a bunch of images and videos that you can use if you want to tell a story about our research. And so recently, my graduate student who had this paper on glass frogs come out. We were putting that together, and I was like, "Give me your video." And he's like, "I don't have any good video. My video is like it's handheld shot with a red flashlight in the field, and it's like no one is going to want to see that." And there it is, and it's in the New York Times. And so it was, he was like embarrassed about the quality of that video, but it was worthwhile to include it, and now it's there it is. And I think so. Even and something may not be great quality video, but it happens to be taken in the mountains in the middle of the night in a stream up in Colombia. Like no one is going to go there and shoot a better video. Right. It's a real thing that happened in the course of the research. So maybe your little iPhone video is going to be the best that there is.
Because at least you're there.
Yeah.
JC?
Yeah, I'll echo those parts of, I think to the extent that you can take video or pictures of processes, as they're happening, it's a whole lot easier than trying to do it when you kind of wish you had it later on. Similarly, when we've had papers that are in high enough profile places that journalists are calling, they want things now, within a day. And it's not really the time to go and start gathering things or trying to recreate things in any way. Usually lab setups are taken down, or the phenomenon itself is a little late for that. So we also try to have folders where if a paper is getting to that point where we're saying, okay, there's an embargo, it's going to be at this stage, it's just gotten accepted someplace, we pretty much have everything at that stage ready for it's just raw. But it's the best that we can find of pictures and videos and everything that people can look at and decide, and we can try to clean up to some degree. But a lot of those processes take a lot longer than the time that we would get to have at that point. Along those lines, in terms of techniques or things, with the work that we're doing, the small amount of editing, in addition to say just the raw video, it would be putting a scale bar and a time bar if it's not sort of taken at real time. So a lot of the stuff that we do is either it's going to be high-speed images or it's time-lapse images. Mm-hmm. And in those cases, if you're stretching time, it's nice for the viewer to have a sense of how much you're stretching time or compressing it. So I don't know if you have an example of one of those videos there. Okay, so these are ones that I took as a grad student.
The middle one?
The middle one, you can see there's a bar on there. It says bottom side, it's 2 high-speed cameras, and then there's a timestamp on each of those. So this is MATLAB, I think I was using in the middle. I mean, it's hardly video editing software to do, but it's something where it's like, okay, I can put those figures up, I can put some text there, I can turn it into a video, and it's enough that someone can see that. And at this stage, this is something I think we put as supplemental to the paper itself, right? So it's something that's already submitted to the journal, it's already kind of posted there, but now we can put this in a place that anyone who wants to write about this, you can go along with a press release or for that in a folder. And I'm trying to think, there's other.
What was this? So this third video is a video that somebody else produced, kind of on your work, but it features just a lot of footage from your lab.
So this would be an example of someone going through one of those folders and sort of taking the different parts and stitching it together to make some sort of story. So here, this might be figure 1A, figure 1B in this case, and then they're putting in some sort of thing saying, oh, look, he's popping that. So it's just giving people the ability to have all of that at their fingertips so that when there is a time constraint, it's relatively easy to have all of that available.
I also want to jump off of something you said, which is it's hard to, right, if the paper's already coming out and but you didn't take that footage at the time, it's hard to recreate experiments, that kind of thing. This also is a factor in when you guys might pitch us coverage of your work. Now, certain publications need the paper to have come out or be coming out, or needs there to be a news hook, right? So you would kind of wait until you had a discovery before you pitched it. But for video, I mean, like, we like to see the process of discovery even before any success happens, right? I mean, if you pitch us your story and all of the like physical work is done, all of the interesting lab work is done, we don't have anything to point a camera at. So I will make a video about research in progress for sure, if it's visual. And then just at the end, we say, of course, they're going to discover the thing that they are planning to discover, and nobody ever questions it. Yeah, nobody asks. The video might be 10 years old. They might have published the paper, but they'll find it, and it'll be cool, and it'll introduce somebody to a topic that they maybe wouldn't have been introduced to.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in, I
please.
think working with reporters, Devin, to your point,
Yeah.
Even if there's not a news hook, say your paper came out and maybe the video comes second, right? Your work might have relevancy within breaking news or within new developments within the news. And a reporter could cover, something tangential or cite your work. And if you have then that video to point to, it's evergreen content. So once you do it, it's not like it's on a shelf somewhere. Usually it could be repurposed in lots of ways. And also, just to echo what Karen and JC said, I think this proactive approach is really important when it comes to video. So if you are looking to capitalize on promotion around new work coming out and you're trying to make some noise, I think being equipped with all of the assets up front really helps reporters, because again, they're under tight deadlines. A lot of times they're like, okay, this is interesting, but can you just explain this to me so my audience will get it? And a video is a perfect way to do that. So whether, ideally you'd be kind of proactive and ahead of a certain milestone that you're looking to march towards, but even if it's after the fact, if it's just showing you in your lab, that could still be repurposed. It could still be very interesting for media to kind of pull back that curtain and show their audiences.
Yeah.
So.
And I mentioned earlier, I also teach video production, science video production, to science journalism students in COM, the College of Communications Master's in Science Journalism program. And these poor students have to deal with shooting in labs just like yours with like little to no production experience. So I do have a few lessons that I give them, and I'm just going to give them to you guys quickly, some of my kind of bullet pointers for just getting you to hit the ground running with a camera. Number one is shoot with intention. When you first pick up a video camera, whether it's your phone or a real camera, your inclination might just be to hit record and kind of find what you're doing, point at something. I would encourage you not to do that. I would encourage you to think about your shot first. Think about whether the right angle to shoot it at is just what I call standing doofus angle to my students, which is just standing there, pointing a camera at your eye line, the same angle that your dad used to take a family photo. This is not a thought through angle, right? Think about it. Think about, would a little more of seeing a little more of the background be more effective in the shot? Is the background distracting? Maybe a little less of the background? Think about your shot. Shoot with a little intention. Think about coverage. Coverage is lingo for getting a bunch of different angles on a subject. So you're filming with intention, but you're not sure whether you should be which angle on the subject is most effective. So get a variety pack. This would be great for people like us when you're making that sort of pitch package Dropbox folder that Karen talked about, if we have lots of different angles on a subject. So if you're filming a student at a microscope, get a wide shot where you can see her and her environment. Get a shot that's close up where you can see her face. Things like that, a few different shots of whatever your subject matter is. Coverage. Think about light. Is your body blocking the light from the thing you're pointing your camera at? Probably is sometimes. If you're filming a person, are they backlit? Are they standing against a window? Is there a better angle from which you could be shooting that person? I have a trick for this that I use when I'm thinking about light. I put my hand out like this, and I look at the back of my hand, and then I spin around 360 degrees, and I stop wherever the light on my hand is best, and that's where I put my subject. Think about doing that. Think about sound. Labs are loud. If you're trying to interview a subject, a student about what she's doing, could you do that in a quieter space? Bad picture, you can kind of do something with. We've seen video that was sort of bad picture, but bad sound, especially if it's something that you need to hear, it can't really be fixed. So think about that. And finally, think about language. I know you guys often have to write up scripts as part of video abstracts or video impact statements. My students have to write voiceover. And the first pointer I always give them is that spoken language is not like written language. When you hear someone reading something that was composed on the page, you can tell. It sounds stilted. The sentences are too long, too complicated. They have clausal constructions that no one would ever say out loud, right? I've been reading to you guys all afternoon, and you can probably tell. It doesn't sound natural. So I have 2 tips for this. One, try dictating what you want to say to a dictation app. Use actually just your spontaneous, natural language. If you're trying to come up with a pitch, if you're trying to explain something, say it. Say it the way that you would to a colleague, or say it the way that you would to someone who doesn't already know everything about your work. But say it to a dictation app. You have to say things like period and comma too, but you'll get used to it. And then look at what you wrote. When you retranscribe that, when you kind of clean it up, and then say it out loud again, it will sound much more natural than if it was something that you just wrote out. That will not sound like natural language. My second tip is please read your script out loud during the writing and editing phase a couple times. Don't let the first time that you hear it be the day that you're recording it. Sorry, I made a call. Wow. Okay. So, should we do this bit? Want to do this bit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we, someday, not today, but someday you might get to the, I want to make sure there's time for Q&A. This will be fast. Probably not today, but someday you guys are going to get to the point where you're putting together your own short video for public consumption, right? Probably on the web. Or maybe we've totally inspired you and you're going to go out and start a YouTube channel for science and get 1 million viewers. Great. But in either case, we're going to share some tips that we've learned at Marcom from producing videos specifically for social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. These are examples of some here. They're 1-minute videos that can be watched without sound. We love making these videos, particularly about science and research, because they put the focus on the visual. And of course, they share really well on social media. Each one of these videos that you're watching now incorporates footage that was given to us by a lab that we then visited, shot a little bit more footage, for example, the slow motion stuff of the Slinky, and then produced a video or did an animation, as you can see on the one on the right. But these are examples of kind of appropriating lab footage and turning it into something. But these videos have a very specific structure, and we've kind of learned through experience how that works. My colleague Alan, who's sitting in the back, I think put these sort of this together. Now these, of course, are for a very specific purpose, for these social media specific videos, but all of these points are equally appropriate to any short form video that you want to have make a big impact.
Yeah, because I think even if you're going in to create a video without the intention of maybe sharing it on social, that's how it might be shared, especially by an external news outlet. So I do think planning the content is key. And you should probably write a script or general storyboard it, but keeping these tips in mind, I think, will really help make your time worth it, right? Because the worst thing is to come out, spend a lot of time with a product that at the end of the day isn't really kind of sellable to media, and then you have to kind of redo it. So it's making sure that you have a strong takeaway and a strong narrative and story through the video. Make it visual. Keep it brief, so keep the word count kind of limited. And I think you also want to end it with what is the main point you want the viewer to get out of this, sum it up.
Yeah, voice and voiciness and personality don't hurt. I mean, kind of to JC's earlier point, like when you're communicating science, clarity is often the purpose, and so you may filter out kind of color and personality. But you don't have to do that when you're talking to media. You can have your personality come through. You can have a little bit of color, and you can have a little bit of fun with it, and the science can still be taken seriously. So that's what we've got. I'd like to return to the beginning for a moment. The title of the workshop is How to Tell a Compelling Story. And what I want to encourage all of you to remember is that your story is a compelling story. You might not think so because you look at it every day, but to most people, and I would argue even the people working right down the hall from you, your colleagues, it might not be so ordinary. There's a lot to your story that would be interesting to a lot of people. You just have to remember to tell it, or get someone like me to tell it. This is a picture of Jacques Cousteau with an underwater camera. That's you guys. You are there at the moment of discovery. We don't get to be there, right? Normal people don't. You're there every day. You have unmediated access to the moment of discovery, and you can invite the rest of us in using video, like Jacques. So be like Jacques. Not going to make you say it back to me. Before we get to questions, I just want to put some resources up on the board. So you can pitch stories to BU Today, BU Research. These are the folks that you want to contact. BUPX down at the bottom, that's me and my team. We produce editorial content. You can pitch me as well. Public relations, where Hilary comes from. If you have any questions related to the kind of stuff that she was talking about, please contact them. And BU Productions, Nancy Mars. I should mention that we do have a for-hire video production team on campus called BU Productions. And so if you want to hire someone to film high-quality footage in your lab or to work with you on a video pitch, all this stuff, there are resources here for you on campus to do that. So they're also in the back of the room behind these cameras, so feel free to bug them afterward. Okay, we're going to do questions. We have 2 mics being passed around. If you have a question, please get the attention of one of the microphone people, and don't begin asking us the question until the mic is in front of your face. Thank you. Right up front. This is who we are.
First, thank you all. That was really, really interesting and important. My question is, if I have a federal grant and I want to sort of plan the budget around how much to include for video production for, and obviously it'll depend on the usage and all that, but let's say video related to phone app development, so video that can be used on phone but that's well produced. How do you think about budget when you really don't know the field of video? Do you just get a consultant who's going to estimate, or how do you think about it?
Is it possible that someone from the world of getting federal grants might be able to speak to that?
I don't have any budget for that in my grants. We shoot our own video, which is stuff that we're doing anyway for the science, and occasionally we use the same cameras for other things, and then all of the, I worked with Devin. This is a thing that people at BU can do for us.
Right, and so I will say that if you do have access to people with video expertise, like myself and the folks at BU Productions, so you can reach out to us and we can just, we can talk about what uses you want, what equipment might be helpful for you, and we can help you price something out. I don't know exactly. I mean, if you're talking about like what those numbers should be, yeah, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. Sure. $15 for that little tripod.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm an epidemiologist, so my lab consists of a computer screen. It's not terribly compelling, but I would like to be able to capture things off of my computer screen and incorporate them into videos. And so do you have a tool or something that you would recommend we use to do something like that?
So there is software that does that. There is in fact free software that will let you kind of screencast. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, so please email me and I can recommend some software to you. But yeah, that's an easy thing to do for sure. Does someone in the audience have an answer to that question?
Yes, QuickTime Player. QuickTime Player?
Yeah,
QuickTime will let you do it?
Yeah, it will. It will.
Captasia, Camtasia, Screencastify. QuickTime will do it?
QuickTime will do it. Yeah.
Why didn't you answer the question? No. I don't ever do that because this is being filmed right now, but we have to use cables and stuff. You guys should just be screencastifying it back there. That's a great question. I thought you were going to say, how would you film my lab and make my work look interesting? Which my work's very interesting. Good attitude.
Exactly.
So I'm a researcher, but I'm an undergrad here, and I started making podcasts with an outreach program that my professor works for, or started. I don't know the right wording for that. But with the podcasts, we want to get the word of STEM out further.
Yep.
And I've run into a lot of tech issue. How do I get these people around? How do I make sure their voices are heard? And also, how do we pick an interesting story to tell? How do I know something that I put on YouTube, maybe a 15-minute long discussion with 4 people, will that catch someone's attention? Also, how do I get people to actually come for the podcast, not just students? Like, professors love ghosting those emails.
Interesting. Any thoughts?
I mean, I guess it's pushing content out, and, like you're asking how people will come to listen to your podcast, right? I mean, do you have, what kind of presence do you have online? Do you have a site? Do you publish these regularly, which like a regular publishing schedule makes people, if they listen to one, they come back regularly. If you're publishing regularly, it's sort of adhering to a regular publishing schedule. I think using social media, using sort of all the tools that are kind of freely available to all of us. And again, we always look at things like, regular publishing schedules are a real key in making sure, there's all the supporting material around whatever it is you're putting out, whether it's a YouTube on video, that there is, the right descriptive text. So, searchers are picking this, searches pick up your content. And, also tying to, if you're talking about, sort of like, chemistry research, go to the chemistry subreddit and post it, get into groups that are looking at the kind of content that you're producing. Sort of, and it's all sort of, it takes some time, but it's ways to kind of put it in front of the audience that might be interested in your material.
It is hard to get people to show up for things.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I haven't figured it out
it's
either,
work.
Especially your professors. Yeah, go to them where they're already going to be. Yeah.
Thank you. So your recommendation for visualization for non-visual work, how would you recommend going about that for a video pitch? If it's non-visual work, but you don't have the expertise to create visualization, what would you recommend?
Right. Well, I think that you can pitch the potential for something like that just verbally to us, just anecdotally. I mean, the potential for animation can be described, and we will take that into account. You can also show examples of work that you've seen done on other people's work that include animations of those kinds, and say, our work is very much like this. We could do, there is the potential for doing something like that for our lab as well. That kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Always just talk to us, always reach out to us, especially now that you kind of know what we're about and know that what some of the shapes of these things are. Just reach out to us. I mean, myself, Hilary, and a whole bunch of other folks here at BU, I mean, that's why we're here. We want to help get your work out there. So we'll do that in whatever way we can.
Devin, can I inject one thing real quick?
Yeah.
I would say
Rachel's name is, she was on the other thing.
I would say think of metaphors too. Like what, if you're studying something that's, if we piled it all on top of each other, would be as big as the Empire State Building. So those kind of metaphors that help kind of break down and visualize what you're studying in objects or scenarios that we're all familiar with. It will help both with video and then also for just distilling the message about your research overall.
And one thing, if I can add, because I think about, we get pitches a lot that it's like very cool research, but it's an algorithm. So, how do you make people understand that, this improved algorithm will eventually lead in the field of robotics to like home assist robotics, and maybe it's like, maybe someday there'll be a robot doing your laundry, like things that I think a broad audience can see the value in it. We do get a lot of things that, really it's algorithms, in computer science, but it's, you know, the end game is really an incredible goal that they're shooting for. It's not there yet, but it's also sort of thinking about where that could potentially lead. Sometimes that's enough to like, wow, you know, we could, you know, go talk about the technologies and how they look now, but how they might potentially look, and that can be visual and interesting. And hearing an expert in that field talk about it, who, you know, people don't get that opportunity very often, you know, and some good B-roll and you know, the whole thing can actually make something, you know, visually interesting that on the surface doesn't seem interesting visually.
The video that's playing now is an animated video that we did with Alex Sushkov, who's looking for axion dark matter. And one thing, this is bouncing off of Rachel's point, he did have some like handy metaphors. I'm not sure whether we actually ran with them, but his experiment is a desktop experiment. It's basically, he was comparing searching for axion dark matter to searching for those things called WIMPs, which you just saw. We put a scale of it, a little man scale on here somewhere. And he was basically like, these guys picture a swimming pool and shooting a particle through a swimming pool. Well, for me, picture just like a bucket on a table. That's what I'm doing. I mean, even that was compelling enough for us to kind of have a visual. So that was good. Good comment.
So I want to echo what everybody else said, which was this was great. You all were wonderful. I'm impressed. I'm curious. There were several mentions of YouTube as a hosting platform, and so this is sort of a university policy question. What's your view of once you put it out there, it's out in the public domain, right? And how much protection do you think there is, or have you discovered any ways to protect your material once you put it out there?
Video doesn't often, I haven't had the experience of it getting misappropriated before. You know, YouTube, oh, that's not true. We did have our video misappropriated. The drone footage over the pyramids, my colleague Bill Politis took that footage, and he put a compilation of our best clips on his Vimeo channel, and we found subsequently the exact same edit on YouTube under somebody else's name. And we contacted YouTube and we told them, and they took it down. So YouTube is good about that kind of thing, and especially if your content is hosted by an academic institution, you know, something very legitimate. I think that they're pretty good about that kind of thing. Have you come across this issue?
We have. Yeah. I mean, we've had people appropriate our content, and sometimes people will repost it, sort of almost like I'm, you know, in a way, and though they're like, I'm hosting MIT's research, you know, so, you know, and we've done the same thing. We've contacted YouTube. We do have news outlets that will sometimes, I mean, most of the time, they reach out to our media relations team and ask for footage, and we are appropriately credited. Sometimes they use that footage in their own you know, they'll make their own video using some of our footage, but we're appropriately credited. And sometimes people will just rip it, but they usually are, you know, sometimes it's on some science, you know, some science publication, social media channel. And people will usually credit us. It might not be in the way that we would ask for it to be credited if our media relations team sent it out, but as long as it's not, the way we sort of look at it is not, as long as it's not like a commercial usage or someone's using it in a way that suggests they have MIT's seal of approval for whatever they're trying to do, or, you know, we're okay with it. And we do ask them to credit us, but it does happen, you know. I mean, all you can really do is tell them to cease, and, you know, sort of like with any imagery, people can take it, use it how they want. You have the right to say it's mine, and then, you know, you can jump into further legal channels if you're willing to do that. But typically, people are pretty good about crediting it appropriately.
This was really very helpful to see the wide range of things that you're doing. All the examples that you've given, and I'm trying to think of all the stories that you've done, here are things either with like little critters or things. There's nothing with like patients and human subjects, and then there are the IRB implications. But often the way to tell the story about research in neuroscience or with patients is really by actually showing the patient struggling, doing something. And people can, as a part of their IRB protocol, put a little section in saying that they want, you know, the patient to release the ability to take videos. And I'm trying to remember whether or not, you know, it could be for the public to see or whatever. So I'm curious about your experience. I'm trying to think, are there things on the research website with videos of patients, and how do you approach that?
We kind of avoid it. Because it is a tangle. Would you want to hand the mic to Barbara? Barbara is the editor of the BU the BU research website.
Yes, we do generally avoid it. However, we have had a couple successful examples, like Emily's World.
Oh, I was thinking about Emily's World, but is she a patient? I mean, I guess she sort of is.
She's not a.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, she's a research subject. And then also the Saving a Face. So there, we have done a couple, but it is sort of a long, complicated process. But those do very well. And I think, you know, having that sort of human impact is great when we can get it.
But then probably the faculty need to think about this when they're doing their IRB protocol, like way up front before they ever do the research, having something in there saying that you'd like the ability to take video, you know, you'd like their permission to take video footage that could be at a later point be used for something like this. And maybe even allow them to say in each particular case whether or not they wanted it to be used for that purpose. But I'm just trying to think about how to get more of that out there, because it's really compelling and interesting work. Yeah. Okay.
Anything else? Well, we're going to hang around, so if you have individual questions, feel free to approach us afterward. Thank you guys so much for coming in today. We really appreciate it. And good luck.